And I just remember someone phrasing this really beautifully that hope is a verb, and hope means to actually defy against something. And I love that punk rock aspect of like designers can hope and defy against the norm and push for something else.
Welcome to Questions for Designers, where we discuss the ideas, influences, and inspirations shaping creative work today. I'm your host, Max Beach, designer, educator, and advocate for the creative process. Each episode, I sit down with creative thinkers to explore how they see the world, what drives their work, and where they think design is headed next. Joining me today remotely is Jonathan Lee, Principal Product Designer at Microsoft, working in an AI innovation studio focused on R&D. Let's get into it. John, thanks for joining me. Please introduce yourself. Who are you and what do you do?
I'm Jon Lee. I live in Seattle right now. I'm a Principal Product Designer at Microsoft. I'm in an innovation studio working on a lot of AI tip of the spear R&D things, more on the enterprise side. But it's been a big shift from industrial design to kind of now doing a lot of AI innovation.
Oh, great. Could you kind of expand on what maybe some of the different types of work that you're doing that separates it from physical product?
So a lot of the incubation space for AI is really understanding how large language models overlap with what a person is really interested in.
Okay.
And then really trying to think about the type of UX workflows that advance productivity or empowering people to do more work in a certain type of way that matches what a person really cares about.
Fair amount of really digging into who users are and research as opposed to just physical needs.
Absolutely.
You were one of my students and one of my first interns, and it's been pretty awesome watching your path since then. Looking back, what stands out to you from that kind of early chapter in your design career?
Good question. I think from the bird's eye view, it's been really understanding kind of my point of view and how I utilize design. And I used to think design was kind of the center of the universe. And then as time went on, it started to evolve into a more nuanced understanding of how to utilize design as a superpower. And that overlaps with a very long journey of trying to understand myself more and what really makes me thrive, what I'm interested in. One of my favorite quotes is from Miles Davis. Man, sometimes it takes a really long time to sound like yourself. And so it's been a really, really long journey of kind of like understanding myself. And from my point of view, trying to give a talk about how to find your own voice. It's often about making your own sauce.
Sure.
I could buy the store-bought stuff.
Yeah.
Really easy, really fast. But when I really make my own sauce, I'm able to kind of see how that fits the world, the business space, design problems a lot more, all kind of like from top to bottom.
That's amazing. I think finding your voice is a hard thing as you enter the career, and you're fighting, struggling, and pushing and pulling. And then once you realize, oh, I have that voice, and you start putting those ingredients together, as you said, make some pretty incredible sauce.
Yeah.
You said that the human handprint fascinates you as we go down the AI rabbit hole. What do you mean by that?
So, kind of related to what I just said, a lot of AI interactions currently is about kind of like prompt engineering what you say to these LLMs. And I think a lot of times it requires a person to completely understand where they're trying to head. And if you don't quite understand the full destination, it just takes time to kind of weave through AI to get to a certain point. But for me, the human handprint is really spontaneous, is really sometimes really random, sometimes really curious, and I'm really fascinated by who we are as humans and what that handprint means as AI kind of takes a strong hold in everything.
So, does that kind of echo almost us being the ghost in the machines? Where as the machines grow, we are the ghosted handprints throughout, in a sense?
I don't know how to answer that quite yet because I think we're all still trying to figure that out.
Right, right,
And I think what's fascinating is AI is probabilistic, and I think we're trained as designers to be a lot more deterministic. And to me, that's where there's like really interesting tension between those two elements. And so, as sometimes I'm trying to grab a lot of inspiration from how we move to mass production, manufacturing, and I think a lot of handmade things were really feared to be lost in that kind of translation. And I
right.
think we're going through that massive shift again right now.
I've had a lot of these conversations lately, and I think what's interesting is the different takes of where the physical still has to exist and where does AI get involved in that? Where does it stay away from it? How, where is the curation? John, who or what shaped the way you see the world creatively?
I'm a huge sponge, Max. So I would love. I'm actually all over the place for this. So kind of my origin story to becoming a designer was as a kid, building a lot of model World War II planes and tanks. Really geeked out on that and just obsessed with all the little details, the instruction design, and how painful it was to put the decals on the tanks and the bomber planes of just
Right.
ripping them and then trying to like improvise. And that eventually evolved into building tanks of robots, which then evolved into becoming a sci-fi movie and book nerd, heavily inspired by Blade Runner and those aspects of entertainment. And that kind of really opened up my mind to a lot of different kinds of entertainment design and kind of like expression of creative pursuits. And then that kind of taking in more inspiration from a lot of just growing up in LA, a lot of motorsports. My cousin at the time I was living with, he was a transportation design major at Art Center. And so the cars he was always had in his garage, I was just obsessed with. So I think he was one of the very first guys to have a Monster Miata. And so I'm just a kid. I'm like
Right.
being a nerd into all these things. And then there's this little tiny Miata in the garage that was just, he was just driving on the tracks and it would just eat up all the Vipers and 911s. And so it was just this like melting pot of being a nerd, playing video games, sci-fi, and then here was this like really visceral, high octane, just bunch of transportation design guys building cars and motorcycles. So it was just a really weird mix of like all of that.
John, were you somebody who liked to take apart your toys and stuff like that, or was it more of the kind of creating and building new?
A little from column A, a little from column B,
Yeah.
but I think I really enjoyed taking on the challenge of getting new sets and always trying to build them and then trying to take different pieces from other sets and combine them.
Oh, that's really cool. Kind of creating your own end result from multiple other people's intended results, in a sense.
Absolutely.
What project taught you the most, even if it didn't succeed?
Yeah, I thought about this one for a long time, and one that comes to mind, my first time at Microsoft around 2014, we were asked to build as part of an R&D effort, we were asked to build a to-do app for college students, which was not in Outlook's wheelhouse. And so we spent a lot of time traveling to a lot of different college campuses across the US. And I really got involved with kind of really understanding college students and what problems they were going through. And so our design team was very intentional about creating a strong point of view of how to capture to-dos, especially kind of like going from life situations to college tasks. And it was such a fascinating problem because we got really close with college students in that. But that project eventually failed, and that really taught me a lot about the value of design and when design needs to be a leader and when design needs to go a little bit in the background to really understand the business and problem space and really understand the language of engineers. And so it really taught me that design is a one piece of the whole picture and when to really kind of lead and when to really observe kind of the playing field to see what's actually happening. And so, long story short, I actually burnt out pretty hard. And so, I eventually, right after that project, took a pretty long sabbatical. We sold everything and then we ended up traveling for a year. And during that time, I was spending a lot of time thinking about like being intentional with time and what my role as a designer was. But just to kind of like dive into some of that texture, I really learned from that project in the sense of sometimes it's about taking a step back and seeing what's actually needed in the moment and then pouring my design energy into that. And it's sometimes it's not always product design, and sometimes it's more about storytelling, framing the right things. I'm sure you're very familiar with this, Max, but I found that very I learned a lot from that journey.
So would you say that that kind of taught you not to just dump your design knowledge into everything all the time, like full blast, and kind of give you that a little bit more of a push and pull with your use of your talent?
Absolutely. Another way to phrase it is really to view it as a portfolio, and instead of investing all in a design doc, it was really hedging my bets and to really have a balanced portfolio.
Yeah,
So if one part fails, you can have a pretty balanced approach.
that's great. That's great. And has that helped with not maybe burning out as much in the sense of finding a little bit of balance both personally and professionally?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm still guilty of it from time to time because I'm just sometimes love to go really deep on the problems and opportunities, but uh, it's really broadened my perspective of where to pour my energy into sometimes and when to protect that energy and really see how the project evolves.
Yeah, I remember day one as one of your instructors. You're a very intense and thoughtful and deep diver on a lot of anything you put yourself into. So it's interesting here, more than a decade later, talking to you about finding that balance of understanding where it's best to put your efforts and things like that. John, what's inspiring you right now outside of design?
At the end of the October, Max, I ended up going to Oklahoma. Went to Oklahoma for the first time, and there was an Army Air Base there. I had this opportunity to spend there 9 days there at a parachute school, and this whole parachute school was dedicated to remembering, honoring, and serving the World War II paratroopers. So during this whole time, I had never jumped out of a plane. I spent my time living and training in this airfield and barracks with 25 other strangers. And eventually, after really intense physical and just sitting in classrooms learning about the process, we learned how to jump out of do static line jumps out of these C-47s that actually fought in World War II. It was just probably one of the most eye-opening and beautiful experiences I've ever had because I rubbed shoulders with a ton of people who had much different viewpoints than I have, and given our we don't have to go into it, but given our climate right now, it was this really fascinating human moment where all that just dropped away, and it was just people trying to achieve something that was bigger than us and really learning, sleeping, eating together, and trying to achieve jumping out of a plane and staying alive. and while honoring kind of like the World War II tradition of all these like 17 to 20-year-olds that did it, not knowing the tech, not understanding how to do paratrooper, and that it was all invented all at the same time, and then these guys all did it. And so it was this fascination with analog, doing things the old ways, which is very, very different from working on AI and all these like harder to understand technical situations. And so those two things together, while kind of being a human again in a very communal environment, really, really was a really rich moment for me.
That sounds like an amazing experience. It's such a stark contrast to designing for AI. What drew you to it initially? You're saying kind of the difference between the analog and digital was kind of one of the results, but what drew you to that?
I'm obsessed with challenging myself and testing myself. I sit behind a computer all day, and so sometimes I get this itch to go do these things when I sit behind a computer too long. And so there's that. There's the origin of my design journey in terms of building World War II tanks, and so that I just fell in love with all that journey, and then really wanting to test myself. It was just a mixture of all that.
So also a bit of a full circle moment when you're talking about you used to build these things and now you're getting the experience to see what it's like to operate, live and breathe and be inside that in a obviously still a somewhat recreated moment. So we're not in the middle of fighting a war, but the idea of what it must have taken to jump out of or be involved in that in the best of times, let alone the worst times in our world history. And also you had mentioned, and I'm kind of familiar a bit, that when you took your sabbatical and kind of did a little bit of off-grid life with what some might call questionable vehicle choices. Can you tell us a little bit about what that journey was like and how that's kind of led into some of the other choices you've made as you move forward?
Yeah, Max, good. You have a good memory. One of the things that stand out of that sabbatical was my wife and I made a goal to drive from London to Mongolia during a rally, and the whole point of the rally was slow travel, and anyone can do it in a Land Rover, but if you choose the crappiest car possible, that was under 100 horsepower, then that's when things get interesting. And so there was this question of, can you drive from London to Mongolia with the least amount of preparedness? An origin story of the guys who originally did it was they were at a bar and they made a bet, and all they had in their pocket was some money, a map, and a pocket knife. And they ended up driving from London to Mongolia to see if they could do it. And so I've always been fascinated in stories like that. Long story short, my wife and I, we picked this 1999 Toyota Yaris that had 200,000 plus miles on it. I bought it for 500 pounds, and we just went on this journey to see if we could do it. Ended up traveling along the Silk Road. But we were in Turkey when the coup happened, and so it was just this mixture of curiosity and exploration and adventure to eventually see what was like driving from London to Mongolia.
That's an amazing life journey that I don't think a lot of people would get in their entire lifetime. And now that's just one piece of your exploration stories. Pretty brave of you and your wife.
Yeah, still married after all that time together in our car. Yeah.
I would consider that a success. Speaking of success, what does success look like for you now, and how has that changed?
Yeah, Max, this is a hard-hitting question for me because it's really evolved. I definitely chased after success, especially in the corporate world, and I would describe that as, I remember a director telling me once that I'm internally motivated and externally motivated. And so that was one data point in me understanding my chase after success, and it's related to also burning out. But these days, I would describe it as really evolving into my question of the human handprint. What does that mean? especially with us as creatives and designers, as things really shift and evolve. I'm really fascinated by the triple bottom line: people, profit, planet. Yvon Chouinard is one of my heroes, and I've really kind of watched and observed how Patagonia as a brand and as a movement has really tried to impact the triple bottom line. And that all overlaps with my view of success right now, as a father of two young boys. My whole goal is just to raise them as two well-rounded humans, and to raise two good men. And so that kind of like, to weave a thread for everything I'm saying, is kind of go from my life experiences to really trying to understand myself as a creative, and now to really evolve that into having a point of view and driving that forward, to really kind of understand what matters.
Yeah, I think that gives you a little bit of a perspective on both what your contribution is, and both as a designer, a human, a father. Looking at the future, seeing that you have young kids, and I'm assuming plenty of young designers coming through your network, where do you think design is most needed in the next decade or upcoming years?
The pace of AI and all the development there, from what I've seen, is extremely fast. I think it's fascinating how many new models come out every week, every model, etc. I think, to me, where design is most needed in the next decade is actually to slow down and actually have a point of view of what we as creatives can do. And something I'm seeing is actually for creatives and designers to have the courage and fearlessness to push forward the things that we care about. So for me, an example is, I don't see a lot of joy and the light in some of the experiences that we're like optimizing and prioritizing. And for me, design was always about being curious, being playing with things, and having a little bit of humor, because I think that that breaks through so much. And I'm I understand the business implications, market pressure, and all the trends. Understand the value of all that, but I think this, where design's really needed, is for designers to have that courage and fearlessness, to push what we really value.
I think that's very well put. It's with all of the digital coming to the front, having that handprint personality to it is something that really only designers as curators can bring that sensibility to. Hopefully, our role, rather than to roll over.
I just remember going through industrial design school and really looking up to some really classic industrial designers and seeing how they played with materials to really come up with really compelling points of views, especially from like the 60s and 70s. I saw really interesting like space age design, furniture design, car design, and I feel like the courage and boldness to push on problem solving and industrial design. And I'm trying to fall back in love with design to see how to be inspired by those movements and to still carry that forward as optimization, automation, all that happens.
John, you said you're obsessed with the poverty of imagination, and that kind of feels like that leads into this topic where you're discussing that digital is moving forward and really starting to understand the why of it, not the how of it. Where do you see this most clearly happening?
Max, I'll be honest. I mean, I see it everywhere. I see it in meeting rooms, boardrooms. I see it in myself as a parent. I see a lot of STEM solutions, a lot of screen-based solutions, a lot of these monthly models to do things and raise kids. And so I have these big questions of how to use imagination and wonder in the meeting rooms and the board rooms and as a parent and society to really be bold and really translate that to kind of like all the different levels of our day to day to see where and what we can do with that. Because from my perspective, in a lot of the work we do, we're seeing that when you heavily use AI to come up with answers and do work, etc., I fear brain rot and skill atrophy. Um, I, I I don't want AI to think for me. I want AI to make me a better thinker. So I want AI to provoke me. I want AI to do my laundry so that I can actually go do the things that I really want to use my brain for and my heart for. And so I'm really curious about this layer of poverty of imagination in so many facets of life that I see right now, and what that means for me as a classically trained industrial designer to understand problem solving, the strategies, the system, to really, really like make an impact there, not for myself, but to um, for the community aspect behind some of like drive to be creative and a problem solver.
I think that's super important. What do you think designers need to cultivate to kind of avoid that trap? What are you doing, and what do you suggest other designers do as a practice to, aside from minimizing use of generative tools?
I think it really comes down to making your own sauce, Max. I think it's really understanding yourself and putting out whatever a designer really believes in. And I think that it takes, if I were to speak to my younger self, I wish I could say to younger John that it takes time to really develop and hone in on that point of view. And it's okay to like make mistakes and like, oh, okay, I put out this point of view and didn't really make an impact, but it just takes time to kind of craft that and hone in on that sauce. And I would really encourage designers to have the courage and the stamina to kind of develop that sauce. Like for me, for example, I always believe in humor and wonder, and I try to put that in all aspects of my design. And I used to be kind of like, oh, I'm in the corporate world, like it needs to be all serious and all the designs need to be high polish and etc. But I found the more vulnerable I was and the more goofy I was from time to time when appropriate, that started to become my brand, and that started to really connect the dots for a lot of the conversations I was having, and that really became a storytelling power superpower to then kind of advance a lot of like designs and concepts that I had. But that was a long-winded way, and I hope I'm actually answering your question, Max. But I think it's just TLDR is make your own sauce, know thyself, and it takes a while, and that's totally fine.
I think that's amazing advice. And you answered a question before I asked it as well. You went into what would you tell yourself? So that's great. Are there any questions or a question that you're asking yourself these days, kind of above and beyond working with AI?
What comes up for me, unorganized thought, is probably what good shall I do today, which is, Benjamin Franklin pulling inspiration from that. But I really think about that, and I think of it from a perspective of not me in the middle, but more about, okay, what am I doing with my hands? What am I doing with my time to actually impact kind of like the community around me? And that translates to kind of like what I get involved with these days.
Right, right. It helps, in a sense, for you to reflect on what you're doing as a filter for your time, your value, what you bring, and what you take in a sense. Yeah.
Yeah, and then just to kind of tie it back to design, I think designers are have the superpower to imagine things and then translate that to something concrete and physical or digital.
It's heartwarming to see you grow and become not just the designer you are, but the man that you are and the father you are. It's kind of amazing, and I'm glad to have been part of and continue to be a part of that journey with you.
Thank you for this, and I feel like you woke me up, and as a college student, and then to now. So thank you for this.
Jon Lee, thank you for joining the conversation. I'm Max Beach. Until next time, keep asking questions.